Say my name with intention. Before I put the niggas on a mission, I can't stay in my lane, I'm in an airplane. Maybe that's why they say she's so fly. You need assistance, call my assistant. My only business, leading the resistance. Fitted, tip paint with a press on. Hard, Teflon with a dress on. I can't wait, I'm tired of the chasing. This whole game stinks, I think I got fragrance. I need excitement, exclamation. When I'm dead is when I'll be patient. You tried to holler, I wasn't with it. You tried again, damn it persistent. When I tell him no, he's gonna be mad. You get invited by a hijab. I'm the one who changed the game, put respect on my name. Let him know. If you want all the smoke, then we can bring all the flame. Let him know. Better watch what you play, cause we get knocked out your frame. Let him know. Run it, run it, run it, run it. When they ask how we move, we tell them we came to rule. Let them know. Every word that you choke can be the last that you spoke. Let them know. When they mention my name, there's a price that they're paying. Let them know. Run it, run it, run it, run it. I speak English, but I'm not English. We were colonized by them other guys. You speak Spanish, but you not from Spain. Peace, and blessings, everyone. We are back at it at the Art of Living. Here we are, third edition. It's about to be exciting. I'm excited. Y'all don't even know, but y'all will know in a minute. So once again, I am your host, Imani Muhammad. I am an author, a activist, a mother, and a whole bunch of stuff in between there. But this show was launched after I wrote my first ebook called The Art of Living. And one of the things that I wanted to do as I wrote the book was to, again, just share with people about, universal principles that I think that over the years, if I've studied Islam and many other religions, that I feel like there's like three principles that are universal, no matter who, what, wherever you are, right? And so it's knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. And you can find more information about my breakdown of those principles in the book. But fast forward, one of the things that I love to do is have conversations, high vibrational conversations that actually lead to solutions. And again, bring people from all over, all different walks of life to be able to show that all of us have a testimony. All of us are our own books. All of us have experiences that we've gone through that can influence, can impact, can motivate other people, So without having those experiences and those dialogues and those conversations, you never really know that what you may be going through, somebody else next to you has experienced that. Or your successes that you are experiencing, someone else might have had that same experience. And so I'm all about dialogue. I'm all about conversation. I'm all about each one teach one, all of us getting to know one another. So that's really the background to the Art of Living. I always take a moment to just give a 30-second intro to what that's about, because again, there's a lot of podcasts, there's a lot of shows, there's a lot of YouTubes. Everybody is a host nowadays. Anybody can go live, so you have a lot of options, is my point. You have a lot of options that you can tap into, but I will say that there's not that many that really focus on the positive vibration, positive conversation, and real conversations, right? Like not some, I made $10,000 in one day and you can, no, we're not doing all that today. We can talk about it, but we're going to talk about you had to put in some work before you made your 10K. It don't just, fall from the sky like Jesus. But anyways, that's what is different about the Art of Living. And y'all will see it, as we continue to have this conversation. So quick promos, travelingpillar.com is my business. So feel free to browse that website. I'm going to just show y'all real quick. This is the Art of Living book that it came out. And the secret behind this, y'all, I am going to talk about the secret, but there's so much that went into this, but I actually got the hard copy on the same day that I closed on my house. So I am a homeowner and a for real author right now. So y'all can support your sister, go to the website, get your copy of the Art of Living. And of course, I love reviews. So I don't do anything and then, think that I can't receive some feedback. So you can tell me you like the book. You can tell me, sis, what are you talking about? Give me all the feedback. I'm open for it. because feedback allows me to grow and continue to do what I do. So another thing I want to share real quick, and then we're going to jump in because we have some wonderful, wonderful guests that are in the studio right now. I don't know about y'all, but winter is coming around. Winter is right here. So my hands are really, really dry. And so I got a product for you. It's called Healing Hands. It's on the website as well. I've been using it the last couple of days because my skin is cracking. So check it out. Again, just a little personal plug of travelingpillar.com. And that's it. That's my little commercial. Y'all can go, check it out as you wish. So today's show. So again, as I said, this is my third YouTube show. I have been doing Instagram lives for the last almost 2 years. So you can see a lot of the previous interviews on my Instagram. I interviewed Blue Pill, different folks, from all over the United States. So you can check those out. So I'm not new to this. But today's conversation, we really going to talk about really Black youth, Black men, fatherhood, and more importantly, specific to Portland. But of course, what we know that is happening in Portland is also happening nationwide. And the two guests that I'm bringing on, we're not going to talk about, the Band-Aids. We're going to really get to the root. And of course, just understand that we are all speaking from our experience. We're all speaking from our own journey and our own scientific evidence of our own lives. So again, that's what's so beautiful about this conversation. So I'm gonna bring in my guests. We got brother JC and we got my brother Andre. So give me a second, y'all, as I bring these brothers in.
What up, Sister Imani?
Peace and blessings. How you two doing?
Doing good.
Good. All right, JC, it looks like the connection is kind of going in and out. So just let me know when you get stable. We're gonna go ahead and switch this up.
I had to grab some creamer. Don't worry. I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here.
All right, even if it's a still picture. Yep, the audio is good, so you all good.
You there, sis?
So let's go ahead. Yep, we here. Yep, I can hear you. I'm gonna go ahead and yep. I'm gonna mute you, JC, real quick, because I need to get you to some. Yep, just get stable and I'll bring you in. But you here. I got you.
Okay.
Yep. All right, Andre. You ready for these questions? You ready? I'm ready. All right. Just so that, for the viewers that do tap in or maybe listen later, introduce yourself, just a quick bio, who you are, where you from, and just whatever else you want to share with the people.
Yep. Andre Miller, he, him pronouns, born and raised in Northeast Portland, grew up off of 33rd and Emerson, right across where, it's recently gentrified, across from the New Seasons where the Century and the Thriftway used to be back in the day. Born and raised, like I said, grew up in Portland, spent some of my time in Houston. My father was born in Vancouver, Washington, because when he was born in the 40s, there was Black exclusion laws that didn't allow him to be born in Portland, Oregon. My mom was from the Bay Area. I got 4 kids that I currently raise with my fiance that I've been with for 20 years.
Yes. So, some of the questions that I want to talk about, but we're going to ease on into it a little bit, but we're going to jump in. So, one of the things that has happened over the last couple of days. So as you know, I'm a founder of the nonprofit Youth, and we launched these billboards around Black excellence and promoting Black youth. And on those images, there's 5 young brothers. It's the backs of them overlooking the city of Portland. I just lay that as context because one of the things that I have been continuously asked is, what does Black excellence really mean? Which I think is very interesting that they even asked that, but also just the words of Black excellence and the power behind the positive piece, right? So one of the things I want to ask you is just how important is it for us as parents, community members, anyone in between, right? How important is it for us to kind of change the narrative of what's happening amongst our young people, our youth, and just kind of that imagery and that's those negative images that are portrayed on them. So just how important do you think positive imagery and just positive affirmations for our young people are?
Yep. I also want to state, I missed it in my bio, but I'm an activist and advocate for the community. I've been an activist since about 2015 after the murder of Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown. And currently in my professional role, I'm a community justice organizer for Commissioner Joanne Hardesty. Also want to state that I'm coming here in my personal capacity today. So everything that I speak on is solely just, my beliefs and from my experience, and educated myself on experiences that I've encountered, as well as just hearing from the people that have been encountered or impacted by those experiences. To touch on your question, I grew up with a lot of mentors. My father was a Black Panther and a social service worker, and he dealt with a lot of trauma growing up. So he didn't have a father in his life, which was, impactful. It in a negative way, it impacted him on how he was going to raise his sons. And he had 3 sons, so with him not having a guide or a mentor himself to understand how he should be a good father, he also didn't know how to father. So that impacted me also. With his trauma that he dealt with personally, he was always physically there for me, but he wasn't mentally there for me. And running the streets and doing other things that he was involved in. So he wasn't always around. So it was important for me, especially with me having a white mom, it was important for me to have other Black mentors that I could look up to, that I seen actually being successful in life. You know what I'm saying? And that's something important for us to be able to have and be able to see. Because a lot of times, we look at certain things like rappers, we look at gang members, we look at other things and seeing them have materialistic type of things, saying that we want those type of things, but that isn't really what success looks like. So the mentors that I actually had in life were really educated, and they were really able to teach me like a lot about my Black history. About me being a Black man, growing up as a Black male in the community of Portland, teaching my history here in Portland. So I think that it's really important to be able to have those positive figures in your life that can kind of balance you out. We always gonna have negative stuff in the community, but as long as you got like a positive person that you can relay on and be able to get advice from, like that'll be able to balance you out in life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, one of the things, well, you see it probably up front more so than I do. And, the statistics, right? That's happening in Portland. Like I continue to say all the time, what we're seeing in Portland is not unique to any other city. Now, the numbers may, be higher than normal, but it's happening. I mean, there's a story that's happening in New York where they did a front page cover of 21 and younger being murdered, right? So like this is happening, right? What do you, like, how do you make sense of it just in general? Like, how do you make sense of what's happening, not only in Portland, and all over the United States? Just one, how do you make sense of it? And then what conversations do you have with your children? And I want to pose the same question to JC too. I see he's back. So that's the question. Just how do you guys make sense of what you're seeing specifically in Portland across the nation, but then also how do you explain it to your children?
So being an activist, I've been able to be privileged enough to also travel around to different cities and see what they're dealing with and what they got going on. So I went to Minneapolis, I went to Washington, D.C., and was able to meet with a lot of activists down there. I was actually just on a call with some government people in Minneapolis. And it's interesting to me that we protested for a whole year. And let me rearrange my camera for you. But
I know, I'm sorry, y'all. I'm experimenting a little bit.
For a whole year and against police brutality. And in Minneapolis, what they're talking about is adding more police to the streets. And this is even young people that are in city council in Minneapolis, and they wanted to add more police to the streets because of the gun violence issue that they're also encountering in Minneapolis. I think that when we talk about gun violence, it's super important that people actually educate themselves on the root causes of the actual gun violence. And what we're seeing right now is that we lived in 4 years of a dictator type of president that spoke highly on a lot of violence. So we're coming out of that type of realm and dealing with a dictator type of president that also marginalized people that was already marginalized, oppressed us more than we was already oppressed, talked about, you know, that we come from shithole type of countries and really like oppressed us a lot more, right? On top of that, we also in the midst of a pandemic that have exacerbated a lot of the issues in lack of socioeconomic equity that we actually see. It widened the wealth disparity gap. So when we're talking about root causes, those are some of the root causes that are leading to what we're actually seeing on the streets. Another thing that we know too is what we're seeing right now. It didn't happen overnight. You know what I'm saying? These are years and decades in the making of them divesting from Black communities. Black communities are dealing with this across the country. We're not seeing this happen in the suburbs and in white cities. You know what I'm saying? Or white predominant communities. You know, we are seeing this happen in marginalized communities. So it's a divestment that has came from Black communities and them not actually being able to supply organizations the proper grants, and not just 1 year grants, but multiple year, so we can be able to sustain and actually work with our youth. And when we talk about organizations that we actually have, like now, like Boys and Girls Club and SEI, like those are okay. SEI is still Black led, you know what I'm saying? But the Boys and Girls Club, they don't give you the privilege to be able to, especially when you're working with Black youth, they don't give you the privilege to be able to direct your programming to the people that you're actually impacting. So it's a lot of divestment that's going on in the communities. It's a lack of equity in socioeconomics, and it's a large wealth disparity gap that we are seeing, and that's what's really leading to the things that we're seeing on the streets. Another thing is we need to teach our kids at a young age shame reduction. What we're seeing is they're living in the social media time. You know, a lot of the beef that they have on social media is boiling over to the streets. They need to be given the proper tools and skills to be able to de-escalate and defuse situations verbally, rather than, you know what I'm saying, resorting to guns. Back in our days, we would fight it out, and, you know, maybe next 10 minutes, 15 minutes or so, or the next day, we'd be all right. You know, we knew where we stood at. People would have respect for each other, but it's a different day and age, and we really got to give these kids at a young age, I'm talking about like at my youngest kid's age, where he's 6, the skills and tools to be able to de-escalate situations.
Right. There he is. Yeah, we're going to come back to that because I want to talk about that shame reduction you talked about, but I want to come back to, we're going to come back to that. I got something to say on that. JC, join us, my friend.
What's going on, sister? What's going on, brother?
All right.
I'm doing pretty good. Doing blessed. And I was listening to the conversation that has already taken place or began taking place. And I agree with the brother as far as like getting to the actual root of the cause. And I would say also, just as far as us as a people worldwide, if we were to go back into the histories of the persecution of, you know, melanated skin worldwide, and taking into account for the fact that specifically in the United States, of our people, how we were bred. Like you take the Buffalo Soldiers, for example, you know, when they couldn't handle the Native Americans or any other force, they went and got the Buffalo Soldiers. So like it's already in our DNA and in our blood to be warriors and to conquer and to triumph over. You know, you get the Vietnam War, you get World War II with the Tuskegee Airmen. Like our people are programmed to triumph. And so if our people don't know exactly who they are, then they can use their triumphant characteristics for wrong, including myself. You know, I'm
Mm.
not pointing the finger
Mm.
at anybody or pointing the finger at any of our people. Like I personally myself, you know, I grew up in the Nation of Islam. I grew up in the mosque and churches and amongst Black excellence. And I knew who I was and I knew the power of our people, you know, and I fell victim to using our greatness and our power and excellence for negativity and
Mm.
for the destruction of our communities at one point in time, you know?
Mm.
And I would say, you know, accountability amongst our people. And,
Yes.
you know, instead of pointing the finger, lending that helping hand.
Right.
And so
Right.
I feel as if, you know, with violence, when it comes to gun violence, see, they made it cool and okay for that type of behavior in way of life, okay, in our community. You know, like the brother, he said he was born and raised here in Portland. You know, I love Portland. See, I was born in LA and I was raised all over. I lived in the Bay Area, East Oakland. I lived in countrysides of Oregon. I lived in Northeast Portland, North Portland, LA. And so I got to see firsthand our people all over the nation. The problems within our community. I got to witness them firsthand, you know, as a youth, you know, advocating. Like I went to the Million Family March. Like I'll never forget that. I went to the Million
Mm-hmm.
Family March. I seen a million Black families moving in unison and positivity, you know, and my mistake was, you know, getting off into the world and falling victim to being asleep. And so I had so much knowledge and power. I utilized that within my community in a different way, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, people like myself and others, you know, we should shed light on giving praise and positivity towards things that aren't negative. You know, like you get in where we from, if you kill a brother, your status is gonna go up,
Mm.
you know?
Right.
And that's a problem.
Right.
And
Right.
so, yeah, I think that, you know, as if we educate ourselves of who we are, who we truly are, and instill that within our children as well, that we will have a better shot because the future is the children. And you know, as when I was a child, what I saw, what I experienced, that's what could make me come back out of the darkness. If I never knew the
Mm-hmm.
light, I might have just stayed in the darkness with the rest of my brothers, you know? And just, you
Right.
know, I could have been in the casket. Like I seen so many of my friends in caskets, boy and girl.
Mm-hmm.
Not just gang members, just Black people in general, you know,
Right.
from gun violence. They
Right.
might not even have been a gang member. They might not even have been active. They might not even have been that or this, but they fell victim to the gun violence because of what's taking place in our community as far as cinema, as far as
Mm-hmm.
music, and not knowing the difference between entertainment and real life.
Right. Right.
See, I could rap about things and then someone say, oh, he ain't living that. And then someone be like, oh, he really is living that. Well, why am I going to get praised for really living it?
Right.
Because sooner or
Yeah.
later, I'm not going to be living at all.
Right. Right.
And
So you
Monty, if you don't mind me stepping
go
in, real
ahead.
quick, yeah.
Absolutely. Let's
Hey,
go.
Jesse, you touched on some really important topics, you know, like social norms, you know, cultural norms, as well as us being conditioned as Black people, right? I also think a lot of our conditioning and us going against each other goes way back into even slavery when they had the house nigga versus the field nigga, you know, and
Come on.
we even use that phrase as a type of mentality nowadays too, you know.
Yeah.
One question that I got for you though is you said that you was able to stay on the straight and narrow and not follow into the footsteps or follow in the path of some of your friends and other people fell. What do you feel actually kept you away from that and was able to, like you said, you would sleep at one point? What was able to waken you up and realize your potential?
I would say actually growing up and knowing who God was and knowing the works and miracles of God, and that being instilled in me at such a young age, that when when I saw the signs, I was able to answer God's call in time before it was too late for me. And I'm not a preacher or somebody that's trying to preach something upon anybody or anything of that nature, but I would say, like, for instance, I was a part of many organizations, street organizations. I started street organizations, and one of the founding members of one of my organizations, he came to me, and he was completely turned around, and I thought to myself, well, dang, I've been down with this brother, I've been down with this brother. Like, we did prison time together. We did 7 years together. We did this, we did that. We did some things I'm not necessarily proud of. And when he came to me and told me he had turned around and he was turning away, it made me really think, like, dang, like, I already knew this. Like, I'm one of the guys that, like, I knew right from wrong. And so when he hit me with that, I'm like, dang, it really touched me, because I'm like, he was one of the homies that was worse off. Like, he was worse off in many ways. Streets, prostitution, drugs, gun violence. We were involved in it all, allegedly. And so it really struck a chord with me because of how much Black history I already knew, and how close I was to God growing up. And for the fact that this brother came to me, a brother that didn't grow up knowing God, didn't grow up knowing Black history, didn't grow up in any of that, and he had a complete turnaround, it inspired me to see my people coming out of the darkness through the power of God. And that's what made me really just turn that switch all the way off.
That's a word. Andre is my co-host, clearly, because that was going to be my question as well. Because I wanted to jump. No, it was good because I wanted to jump to that, because I think right now we have so many young people and even adults, right, that are caught up. I'm gonna just use the word caught up, right, in that negative lifestyle. And I will say, especially in Portland, it's so hard to, if you Black in Portland, it's so hard to identify where you belong, right? Like when we grew up, I could say, if all else fails, I'm going to Northeast Portland, right? Like I'm gonna go to Irving Park, I'm gonna go to Sabin, I'm gonna go to MLK, whatever it was. There was a place that I could feel like I was at home, and I don't think that exists anymore in Portland. It really doesn't. There isn't a centralized place that we can say we feel at home. So now I'm looking at our young children, right? Our babies, our 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds. So what becomes home is that fast life, is that street life, right? Is that quick money, because I don't see anything beyond that, right? Like you both mentioned about media and movies, and just the portrayal of what Black men or Black community is supposed to be, right? But we don't have a lot of that positivity as an alternative that we can see that our young people can actually touch. And so I think it's so important to really highlight, to that question that you brought up, Andre, highlight what made you switch, right? What was that tipping point for you to say, you know what, I'm good, and maybe some of us are not in the lifestyle that JC just mentioned, right? We all have our dark moments, you know what I mean? But we all hopefully have that moment where we can say enough is enough, right? But there's so many of our people that don't get there. And I think talking about what it has been for us to make that switch is really important, because that helps people see themselves, in one another to make those changes. Andre, you got something?
Yeah, I think it's really important. You touched on a couple of things, just the gentrification and the redlining, that leads to a lot of the issues that we facing right now. they pushed us out of all of our neighborhoods, and we don't have neighborhoods like we did back in the day. Back in the day, you could know, hey, if I go over to so and so park, you know what I'm saying, I know that I can be in trouble. Or if I go over in this hood, you know what I'm saying, I know what I'm gonna be able to encounter or what I'm gonna face.
Mm-hmm.
But nowadays, you can meet that anywhere, right? We getting pushed to the what we call the numbers, which is like outer southeast Portland, Gresham area, and we all getting pushed into low income housing, apartment complex where you could be in the same place with multiple different gangs, and not those same gangs actually have differences, you know. So you encountering beef in the same apartment complexes, where back in the day you would actually have neighborhoods where you would know where you would go, and that's that set, or that's that set, you know. So you touched on a really important topic that I wanted to talk about too, is just gentrification and redlining, and how that actually is leading to a lot of the things that we're seeing right now.
And he is correct, because, for instance, that happened in Chicago.
We lost him. He was about to touch on.
We lost him. He was about to. I heard Chicago. Right.
We start talking about
the side. There you go.
That's when the antennas go up. But out in Chicago,
they cut you out, but you back now. Yep.
Out in Chicago, they moved they moved the black neighborhoods to the suburbs, and what it did was it collided all of the street organizations into the same neighborhoods that they weren't necessarily running into each other in.
Yep.
And then even though we aren't supposed to be killing each other, we know that problem already exists. So if you looking at it from a bird's eye view, like we playing war or battleship, you can just be like, oh, okay, let me get all those people over there so they can self-destruct each other, because they are intertwining with one another. You know, it might start off, oh, yeah, we funked back in the day, but now we're going to connect and we're going to link in. And then now that they linked in, they got so close that no matter what, wickedness and treachery is going to flow through that lifestyle regardless. You just going to have to be ready for it. And then if your connect falls, then there's a war right there. You know, and that's going to happen. There's no way you're going to coexist with an organization that believes they the top organization, and then you believe you're the top organization. There's gonna be heads bumping.
Right.
And
that's facts. Yeah,
that's crazy. I mean, it just we lost him again, but it gives me goosebumps as he was talking, because like I said, you know, this wasn't designed overnight, you know, like, and I think more about as like he's talking and we discussing this, like it makes me think that they formed this against us so we can start killing off ourselves, you know, like this was their plan,
right, all along.
Yep,
absolutely. And the sad part is that, because this is what I believe, because those of us that are leaders, we're not doing our part in terms of reaching back, right? Because we're not constantly going back. And some of our parents, you know, they told us that we had to figure it out, right? So there was a gap between that passing down that knowledge. And so now, it's easier for the enemy to sit back, because we're doing it to ourselves. Not only violence, but we talk about it ourselves the worst. You know, we we nitpick each other the worst. We see one person successful, we want to pull them down, like, because we've been taught by the enemy, and all we're doing is perpetuating the same white supremacy over and over again, just in dark skin. You know, and so I think that's why this conversation for me is so powerful, because again, it's pointing at the root, but then it also puts the obligation back on us. Now, yes, the enemy is the enemy. Let me make it very clear. I am not exempting them for the dirt that they continue to do, and they need to be held accountable. And I'm gonna leave that for God to do all that work with our help. But at the same time, we also have a social responsibility as a Black community to make our place and our homes and our families a decent place, right? So we do have to stop doing all those same damn things that we're blaming the oppressor doing to us, you know. And that's yeah, I'll leave that alone. But you know, that's
Start like
where I
with
think.
also with the
Go
respect,
ahead.
respect for where we come from. For example,
Mm-hmm.
like Pac said, if we don't, we'll have a race of babies that hate the ladies that make the
Mm,
babies. And I am of that race.
mm,
You
mm,
know what
mm.
I mean? And uh, for example, like if you were to watch 12 Years a Slave and you see how the master was treating that black lady, and you will know where that game comes from. And so you will see how he was mistreating that black lady. And we learned that from that. And so we continue to mistreat black women, including myself. Um, it disconnects us all as a village, because you got real strong black women, which we know there's more black women in college than there is black men,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
so
Absolutely.
then now the black men, it has even been targeted even harder, because if they can get them black women not to like us black men as well, we already been mistreating them. So they looking at us like, oh well, you're already mistreating us, so they don't care. It's getting to that point, well, because we're
Mm-hmm.
being such a sorry excuse for black men, that they
Mm.
don't care no more, because you can only keep on knocking at the door, or trying to say you're going to change your ways so long that somebody's going to be like, you're not going to change your ways, you know. And
Mm.
I'm not pointing a finger, like I fell victim to this behavior and this activity. When I noticed it though, I noticed that, just for example, if I mistreat black women, someone who looks up to me, I could have a whole fleet of black men that look up to me. Once I mistreat, then they start to do it too.
Right.
And it
Right.
becomes the culture and the norm within my circle and how we move and how we mob, that it starts becoming normalized. And
Yep.
not say that we don't get jeweled up and get cars and get all this stuff. Now the youth watching, not
Right.
just my fleet, but the youth is now watching as well, because they like,
Right.
oh, I see, that's how, they're doing good, but in
Right.
reality we doing all bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
So
not
that's
here
the
to, I'm
next.
not judging.
Yep.
One man's perception may not be the next man's reality. I'm not judging any of my brothers, or pointing a finger at them, or trying to ridicule them, or turning my back on them, because I was at a low point in my life, and one of my brothers, he didn't turn his back on me when he got to that good point.
Right.
He was like, let me help out this brother who was at a low point, because we could look good, smell good, dress good, drive good, but we still at a low point,
Right.
because we riding around with the blicky. We look in every direction because we looking out for our own people. And then me personally, I'm looking out for them people too, not just black
Right.
people. I'm looking out for them people, because I grew up, knowing that they were
Right.
targeting me. So I had double stress,
Right.
and yeah, it
So
is
I
it
want to
is
jump
a
on. I
problem.
want to, yeah, I want to just say that too about the youth, and then also both of you, are parents now, and so I mean that I put it out there, but that's an added weight. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm a mom too, and so like looking at my son, as much as I indoctrinate him and try to get him on the positive, as a black woman, I can only do so much, and I will be the first to tell you, I am not trying to make a man. I can't make a man. I can help him be good, you know what I mean, and nurture him, but he got to be raised by other men. But to that point, and you brought that up, and again, throw it back to Andre and back to you, JC, just in terms of, and I don't think you're calling anybody out, because you've always said you speaking from yourself first. But it's important for us to name the behavior. You know what I mean? It's important for us to understand what we are actually doing and seeing how it impacts and it influences young people, positive or negative, right? So anything that we do, people are watching. So for you both, in terms of just like, again, being a leader, being a black man, being a father, how, I guess, what are some ways or some, I guess, tools or techniques or methods that you have in your mind as you parent and as you share that to your own children, but again, just kind of like to the village children? Like, what are some techniques and things that you two have done and are continuing to learn over the time? Because I know that parenting is an ongoing process. But what are some tools and things that you can just kind of drop for the viewers that are listening, just like how you both have kind of managed this?
I think something that's really important as we preface this important dialogue too is that there's a cause and effect, right? And the first cause of what we're seeing being the effect is institutional racism. So when he was actually talking about that there's a higher percentage of Black women in college, there's a higher percentage of Black men that also got taken out of those households that wasn't able to be able to go to college. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
That
In
had
jail.
they had to deal with the school to prison pipeline too. You know, so for me, as a father of four, I think the best way that I go about it is just trying to be a role model for them first. Making sure that I don't end up in jail, making sure that I don't become a statistic. And then besides that is making sure that they can be somebody they can rely on for information, for advice, for my own experiences, so they don't go down those same roads that I went down. And really just being that role model for them, and that's living every day to be the best that I can be, and sure that tomorrow I can be better than I was the day before. So I really hold that to my dear heart, and that's how I try to go about raising my kids. I also think something that's really important is I don't hide stuff from my kids as far as like what's going on in the world. We have those discussions. No, they was out. They traveled the country with me when we was doing our activist work this past summer. They was out protesting with me every day. You know, my oldest daughter and my oldest son are both activists. You know, so just not hiding anything from them as far as what's going on in the world, and being completely honest with them about certain things that they'll come across in life. Because I don't think that, like I said at the beginning, like I had a lot of mentors that were educated, but they weren't experienced. So with my dad physically being there, but not mentally being there, I didn't have somebody to tell me things that I was going to come across as a Black man as I continue to develop throughout the years. I'm able to be that person for my kids and tell them things that and barriers and roadblocks that they going to encounter before they even get there. Now, it's their choice if they want to take on those barriers and those roadblocks, or if they want to try to divert, you know what I'm saying, and go around the other way. But I think that it's important to, first of all, be that role model for your kids. Second of all, be completely transparent and honest, and have those tough dialogue conversations with them.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I have to agree with the brother on that, because, for example, I fell victim to the prison pipeline, and I went to prison, you know, for some years. And just as far as knowing education, just as far as knowing how important education is, because I was reading the Miseducation of the Negro by Dr. Naeem Akbar, and how the brother was saying that, you know, our brain is the most, tell your children that their brain is the most powerful asset that they have. Because I was like, okay, I'm pretty smart, but was I smart enough? You know, because I still fell victim. And so I would try to instill that into my son as much as I could. I would always ask him, what's the most powerful thing you got? Always, for years, until now, he is smarter than me. And if I ask him what's the most powerful thing you got, he's gonna say my brain. And then also touching on what the brother said, being an example, like even though I was incarcerated, I went to college, and I graduated college, and I got a degree, so that, you know, I wouldn't just be that brother that wasn't matching up with the sisters that went to college. Like I just went to prison. I'm the total opposite of what they did, but no, I actually went to college too, and I valued that education, and so I had that. So like when I tell my son, you know, you got to do good so you can go to college, and he asked me one time, he said, "Did you go to college?" And I actually had the blessing to tell him, yes, I did. Do you remember when you came and saw me and I was wearing that hat and that gown? And he said, yes. I said, I was graduating from college then, but you got to go further than me. And so I think that one, and I honored the brother here for being there for his kids from day one. And it makes me want to experience those things like, oh, talk to my son about these issues, these issues that are kind of hard to talk about, but he says he talks about them with his children, and that's just inspiring me. Like, oh dang, like I remember when Brother Roxanne would talk to me about stuff like that, you know, because my dad's from the Philippines, so you know, even though his bloodline roots from, you know, Afro-Filipinos, he's not from America. So my dad didn't have a black father from America. You know, I'm kind of like Nipsey. Like, my dad was from a foreign country, and so my mom was from America, and so she would have me around black men that would tell me things. And when he said that, it just brought me all the way back, and I was like, you know what? I need to have those discussions with my son, with my brother, with our children. And I just, man, that's amazing, man. That's tight. You feel me? I'm telling my
absolutely, I mean,
so many folks in the room with all the sons, and I'm like, bro, that's tight, bro. Like, you got all your sons with you, and some people don't. You know, not to point the finger. Like, I pointed at myself. I was gone, so like I missed that, and you know, I gotta get to it.
I think too, and I'll pose back to Dre. You know, I think it's you know, my son, he asked me all types of questions, and I'm gonna be honest, you know, I get frustrated because he you know, he came to me, Mom, I want a gold tooth. I was like, what? You know, I mean, y'all know me, you know, both of y'all know me, so I'm like, anything that I'm always going to why you want a gold tooth? Who did you watch? What did you see? You know what I mean? So, and then he was like, Mom, can I get my ears pierced? Now he 9, y'all. He 9. I'm not ready for all this, right? But I say that to say, no matter how hard I try to insulate or protect or whatever, you know what we do as moms, the influence is going to be there, right? And so I struggle with like how deep to go with him in terms of like the propaganda or the manipulation or the media like we talked about. And so I think that's my struggle, is like, what's age appropriate? But then I'm also like, y'all, like, we just got to tell him, you know what I mean? Because I don't want him to just get it from somewhere else either. And so I think, you know, and I'm saying this to be full transparent, you know, for the viewers that may be in the same situation, it's like, you know, you want to have those conversations, you know, with your children. You know that the image of the black man right now, every time they turn on the TV, they either in handcuffs, they shooting. I mean, it's just nothing positive. You don't see lawyers on TV that are black, you know, on an everyday basis. And so I think for me, it's like, what's age appropriate and how to have those conversations that make sense. So I'm throwing that back to you, Dre.
No, I think it's really hard, right? I mean, I have 4 kids, so I have to take each kid individually, you know, and where they at right now. It's interesting to me because, like I said, all 4 of my kids protested and marched with me. My 6-year-old was out there with a megaphone leading chants and yelling Black Lives Matter, having his fist up, you know what I'm saying? And he'll even come to me and he'd be like, Dad, let's have a talk. I'd be like, all right, what you want to talk about? He'd be like, let's talk about Black Lives Matter. And I'd be like, okay, let's talk. He'd be like, let's talk about the police. And I'd be like, all right, you know, let's talk. So like, he's 6 years old, you know, he keep it lit. You know, he wrote a piece of paper yesterday and he did his handprint on it. He was like, Dad, in each one of these fingers, I want to write something about the black community in it. And I was like, okay, well, let's start talking about Black Lives Matter. Let's talk about police brutality. Let's talk about racism. You know what I'm saying? Let's talk about equity. You know what I'm saying? So he was like, all right, how do I spell them? So we started going through them, you know, and spelling them and stuff. But this is stuff that, you know, he come to me and start talking about.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, if kids want to have those discussions and they're coming to you and talking about certain things, I think that it's super important. I also think that it's super important with what you just did in purchasing a house, really showing your son the difference between materialistic type of things and how to really build generational wealth, because we weren't taught that as a Black community. You know what I'm saying? We don't even have those opportunities, those resources, that income, you know what I'm saying, to be able to really do that. You know, we're taking a leap by faith to be able to, you know, my mortgage rate is sky high. You know, I'm taking a leap in faith to be able to have that generational wealth for my family, to be able, my kids to be able to take on. So I think really talking about the materialistic type of stuff that's gonna go and come, you know what I'm saying, and then really like having like that residual income, that generational wealth, you know, building into what you're doing with like stocks and Forex and stuff like that. So you can be able to have a stockpile of money that's continuing to grow, you know, as the economy and stuff is growing. I think that that's super important, but you really got to take it individual basis. And as things come about, you know what I'm saying, present it in a certain way, depending on how your child is.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Jasey, you want to jump on that?
Yeah, I would have to say, for example, you know, I was a very, like, I'm hearing how his son is, and that's amazing. Like, I was a very, very impressionable individual as a youth too. Like, even my brothers, I remember my brother, like, when we would go see Minister Tony in LA, like, my brother was making comics. Like, I remember he had a comic, and it was like a strong Black man on the front of the comic, and he was, you know, he was holding a flag, but it, you know, it stood for Black power. And I was like, my little brother drew that. And it was like, you know, like that reminded me like, oh, okay, his mind is already ahead.
Yes.
You know, and I admire that about children that have that in them, because, you know, you could tell they come from a strong family, like that, with values. And I would say also, in honor of my dad, is he was a homeowner. So he, you know, he was from the Philippines. He was a homeowner, and he never bought no houses outside the hood. He always lived in the hood. And so it made me think like, okay, my dad is not afraid of Black people. He's not afraid to live in these neighborhoods, and he's owning a home. And what it showed me was like, oh, okay, though I don't have a home, I don't own a home now, it made me believe I can own a home because I come from that man. Just like how he said your son will see he can own a home because he comes from you.
Right.
And that goes back to the example. Leading that example.
I just want to jump on that too, because, you know, and I appreciate the praise for that. And it's mindset, right? Like, I didn't, like, nothing changed in my income. You know what I mean? It ain't like I just got a raise and then it was like, oh, let me go get a house. Like, it was literally a mindset shift. And I think that that's where everything that we've been talking about is really, we've talked about circumstances, but we're really talking about a mindset. We're talking about shifting how we think, how we do things, how we carry ourselves, you know? And so for me, it was, I joined BWO, Black World Order, Bridging Wealth Opportunities. And I've been studying finances for a year, basically, just studying the stock market, all those different things. But the first 2 weeks of that course is mindset. You have to evaluate your personal relationship with money, how we were taught to look at money. I don't know how many times we grew up with our parents said, don't touch that, I can't afford that, or money don't grow on trees. All of that was playing in our psyche of how we either grew a positive relationship with money and currency, or how we were like, it was a scarcity mindset. You know what I mean? And so honestly, y'all, hold on. I'm sorry. The phone rang on my computer. Anyway, I got to disconnect that next time. For me, it was, I had to really evaluate how and what my relationship was with money. So here I am at 40, and I'm gonna be honest with you, at 40, now I can say I understand money, currency, investing, saving. I get it now at 40, right? So to that point of teaching our children, now I'm so committed in passing this down to my son, who's 9 right now. You know what I mean? I don't need him to wait till 40 to get it, because then he gonna be 60 years, if not 100 years behind, like we were with our parents at times on different pieces of generational wealth. So I think, again, I just want to just reiterate, everything that we're talking about is about having a different mindset and making choices, right? Better choices, decision making that put us in better opportunities and positions to reap the benefits, whether it's changing our life, changing our community, changing our family dynamic, whatever it is. Like, everything can be brought all the way down to decision making and choices, right? And so the more knowledge we have, the better opportunity we can be in to make better choices. And that's the same thing that, we teach our young people. But I do want to talk about a little bit with the remaining time that we have, because I definitely want to give you both an opportunity, especially JC, because I know he's an artist, so he can give his plug for who he is. Amazing artist too, by the way. But what are some of the highlights of Portland? So both of you probably had opportunities where you could have moved away, maybe, or went somewhere else, but you've planted your roots here in Portland. What is it about Portland? What do you love about Portland? And what are some of the things that you kind of see that are happening either on the horizon, that just kind of makes you smile every now and then? I'm sure it ain't the streets right now, but there's highlights in Portland. So what is it about Portland for you two?
I think that, Portland's I lived in Houston. I stayed in Atlanta for a little bit. I got family also in Oakland and Richmond, California, so I go down there and visit. But Portland's always like a tight knit community, most of the Black people, you could go around, and when you were like at certain concerts or clubs or bars or something, like you more than likely know everybody,
Right.
So growing up here, I think that it's home for me. I just feel so comfortable being here. I think something that's on the horizon and something that I really appreciate about the racial justice uprising is that for once in a time of being here as a Black man in Portland, I felt like in 2020, my voice was finally being heard. You know what I'm saying? Instead of just being like that angry Black person where like I'm coming to people with concerns about certain things and I'm just an angry Black person, where people are like awake now and people understand what marginalized community members and marginalized people actually go through. So I think that we're living in a time where we can actually reimagine and reinvent what community looks like. And to me, it bothers me when people say that we want to go back to normal, or we want to go back to like what things used to be, because that normal didn't work for us. You know what I'm saying? So now it's time for us to be able to think about what our normal actually is now. And that's one thing that I'm inspired about in the work that I do as an activist and the work that I do working for an elected official.
Yes. I love that.
I would have to say what I love most about Portland, growing up, I lived in East Oakland. I went to E. Morris Cox Elementary. I lived in Compton. I went to Lincoln Elementary. I graduated 5th grade from Ambler Elementary off Avalon and Carson. And one thing that me and my brothers always talked about when we would come back to Portland was, there's playgrounds at the schools. They got newer books at the schools. They got cleaner classrooms at the schools. Portland was kind of like heaven to us when we would come up here. And when I came back, when I started high school, I would say when the Northeast was still, heavily dominated by Black families, I would say, some of the royal, quote unquote, Black families, they welcomed me in, like as a young man, I was welcomed in by open arms by some of the great Black families around here. And it made me fall, when I jumped off the porch, it made me fall in love with Northeast Portland because of the love that was shown around. And it is a small community. If you in Compton or Carson and you making music or doing whatever you do, like it's gonna be, you're gonna have to go. I'm not saying we didn't go hard, but I'm saying you're gonna have to really bring it because the community's so large. You know, like he said, it's real tight knit around here. If you happen to know, you know, the strong Black families, and you guys become acquainted with each other, the ecosystem will start to flow for you in a positive way. And on top of that, you know, there was also, you know, organizations here such as the Prospective Gents Club, SEI, certain things like that, you know, even BMIT, you know, things like that I was involved in, that like if I was in a bigger city, they never would have been able to grab me. You know, like in Compton, when you hit fifth grade, and you like we lived in the Limes. We lived in the Lime Street area. When you hit a certain age, you from that hood. You know what I mean? Like there ain't no getting around it. Where your mom stay, where your grandma stay, all that, they on you immediately. So my mom moved us from there at that time here. And I didn't even go to school 6th grade, not one day. You know, I was with Brother Son every day, you know, learning about life. I was becoming a man at 11 years old. And I went to the Salvation Army, the studio there every day. And I fell in love with the love that was shown here in Portland, because I think even around the country, everybody recognized that Black men were targeted and we were at risk. But here, since it was a tight-knit community, kind of like a community college, I got the blessing and privilege to actually have one-on-one with good mentors. Opposed to if I was in a bigger city, it would have been harder to have that one-on-one mentorship.
Right. That right there is really valuable. And I think that's one of the things that I see is missing right now. And we got to get back to, in terms of just making sure that our young people have access to positive mentors. You know what I mean? Making sure that they have access, and opportunities, right? And that's not, you ain't got to be just part of one program to get on the path of greatness, right? Like all of us, whether we represent an organization or just who we are, again, those of us that call ourselves leaders, we got to continue to reach back, because our young people right now, because there is no centralized place, where do they go, right? Where does a young 14-year-old Black boy go when he wants to, you know what I mean, find a role model, you know? And I think, to me, those are the simple solutions that we can get back to, because that's what we had in the 90s, right? Like, yeah, the violence was there. This ain't new in terms of like the gang or the beef, and like it's been there. But the alternatives that we had and the prevention that we had was heavily saturated and was more prevalent. And back to what Dre talked about, the shame reduction, I wanted to say too, you know, one of the things that I think we have to spend more time on is that what they call now social emotional learning, SEL. There's a lot of money for that right now, but it truly is emotional intelligence, right? Because if we teach our 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10-year-olds how to resolve conflict through conflict resolution, right? To have a dialogue. When somebody offends you, you talk through it. You know what I mean? You don't get mad. You ain't going to cuss them out and beat them down. Or you might, but it's going to be hands only, right? How do we get our children to become grown adults who can actually resolve their problems with dialogue, right? So that's a missing piece that I don't see that's happening in a lot of our schools, outside of schools, any of that. It's like, you ran me off the road, it's road rage. I'm coming after you. You know, we done seen that happen in the news so much now lately. Just people getting pissed off and can't control their emotions, and the end result is somebody lost their life. That's the same, right. You know, I don't want to minimize the street life, but that's how I sometimes categorize the reactions that happen in the street life, is that we're responding off of emotion as opposed to dealing with whatever takes place. And so I think that's another piece that we got to start teaching our babies now. That's a prevention piece. If we start training the 6 and 7, 8-year-olds now how to just resolve conflict, you can be mad, but you ain't got to go take somebody's life. You know what I mean? So anyway, that's just another piece I wanted to just throw out there in the conversation of just the emotional intelligence of our young people, of our families, and as adults. We have to be able to get control of our emotions. Otherwise, we make poor decisions.
I think it goes back to you talking about the programs, though, because the brother mentioned Perspective Gents, and I was actually part of Perspective Gents with Kevin Fuller and Mr. Frazier and Mr. Lewis and all of them, you know, and also not even just them, but there was multiple avenues for me. There was Mrs. Collins' after school program when I was younger.
Yes.
There was Dapo Sabobahim that would pick me up in his Astro.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So like,
Dapo, yeah.
there was multiple programs and avenues that you would be able to go through where we don't have that. And also those programs can be beneficial programs that would actually be able to teach the shame reduction and the emotional intelligence and the conflict resolution. Because as we see, even with the critical race theory, you know what I'm saying, being implemented into schools, there's opposition against it, so trying to get those other things into schools and into curriculums can be harder, but we can implement those in our after school programs or in our community-based organizations, and having them actually teach the kids those type of skills instead of depending on the educational system to actually
Come on. Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And be willing to sit down for conflicts too. Like I said, I was welcomed in by some of the big Black families here. And I remember an incident where I went to Grant and I went up to Jeff and caused some ruckus with one of the families. And he was actually one of my friends. And I remember getting to my dad's house and I walked in and I seen him sitting at the dinner table with his family. And I said, oh, snap, they here. And we had to really sit down at the dinner table and discuss, like, the problem of me going up to Jeff and causing a ruckus. And like, we were in JIT. The thing is we were in JITs together too. And so it got even bigger. It became like a big topic, like brothers going against each other and, families really coming together and sitting down. Like my family was there, his family was there, we talking to each other. They got the social medias froze on where we were talking mess to each other. Like they had it froze. So I had to tip my hat to the old school Black community of Northeast, because I have to say that they did step in when something like that took place.
Yeah, and that's just we have to get back to that. You know what I mean? Our children are imitating us, right? So they're imitating how they see us handle conflict. And if all they see is, especially when you turn on the TV, that show Housewives of Atlanta or whatever it's called. I mean, if you're a young Black girl watching that, you gonna think that that's how you're supposed to react. You're supposed to cuss another sister out. And I'm sure it mirrors the same thing with brothers. And so again, if we're modeling that sit down, if we're modeling those, you ain't got to holler just to get your point across, right? So I just think, again, that's why I love this dialogue, because again, we're pointing out behaviors, but we're also, again, just getting us to shift our thinking, shift our mindset to create a different, approach to our community. So I know we at our 1 hour mark.
Quit playing in that closet.
That's that parenting 101. There it is. I want to give you both an opportunity, just, as we close out, any final thoughts on this conversation. I definitely want to invite you back in the next couple of weeks, just to just keep this conversation going. I'll field some questions from our viewers as we, just continue this dialogue. Because again, one of the reasons why I wanted this is because I don't hear it happening in the mainstream. I did an interview and they continue to ask me over and over again. I did 2 interviews with local stations, and they kept asking me, are you frustrated with what's happening? And how do you feel as a Black woman seeing, your brothers and sisters being murdered? Like literally want to get me on that emotional roller coaster. And the reality is, if y'all want to really solve this, then let's talk about some real solutions. But they don't want to have the conversation. So that's why I love this conversation, and I want to continue it, because again, it's not being heard. So any final words or any final thoughts, Dre, and then I'll pass it over to Jasey as we close out.
Yeah, Money, I appreciate you inviting me to this. It's something that I'm super passionate about. I love to be able to talk about stuff that I've been experienced by, stuff that I've been impacted by. I mean, I just lost or three of my friends just lost their children just in August, you know what I'm saying, to gun violence. And then another one of my friends' father got murdered, so like I'm being impacted by it. I got probably 15, 20 friends that's been murdered. I got a cousin that was murdered in Richmond and a cousin that was murdered on Albina and Killingsworth. You know what I'm saying? So I'm impacted by gun violence, but one thing I love doing is I love correcting the false narrative. I love educating people about really like looking at the root causes and looking towards upstream solutions. So I like being in these type of environments where like I've even though somebody that's been impacted by this, somebody that's been experienced by this, I'm educating myself about these type of situations. I'm looking into the professors and I'm looking into people that really study behavior and really study like gun violence and violence, around the world and see how it's impacting us. And the United States actually has the largest wealth disparity gap, and that's also why we also have the largest crime statistics too, because of the large wealth disparity gaps.
Exactly.
So I love really educating myself about it. I love to be able to reiterate that education that I'm actually learning, and so I can be able to correct the false narratives that are out there about adding more police to the streets, because one thing that we know is the more punitive that you are, the more violent of a society that you can create. And if people think that they actually going to solve gun violence right now, the only way that they're going to be able to solve gun violence right now is to add the more police to the streets. But what that does is that actually profiles more black and brown people. That puts more black and brown people at stop and frisk, and now they getting arrested for low level type of crimes and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? Like that doesn't do nothing but oppress and marginalize the people that are already oppressed and marginalized. So we got to really start thinking ahead. We got to be more proactive. We got to start investing back into these black communities and back into these black organizations and looking at a 5 to 10 year plan. And when we doing that, collecting the data on that, my 6-year-old right now, giving him the skills and the tools that he needs. So then when he gets to middle school and then he gets to high school, I'm starting to be able to see a shift in the change of the dynamics in Portland.
Right. Absolutely. Yes.
In conclusion with me, I would say, as far as, the history here in the United States of America, when it comes to gun violence, it's been here from the beginning. You hear it in the songs, you hear, the bombs were bursting in air, violence is being praised with all the way to the flag of the United States of America. And for example, like they say, honor our soldiers for they fight for our freedoms. And even though it sounds cliche, they're not lying, because in order to have all of this stuff right here and all these privileges, it's sad, but in this world, somebody got to die, because, like he said, there's gaps. So if we just look at the wealth gap of our country compared to other countries, it automatically can't run no country without a military. You can't run a nation without a military. And so our nation has so many blessings and privileges that we have no choice but to have a heavy military force behind us.
Right.
And with that, it automatically puts it in the American culture that we tote guns. And it's just in the culture as far as the building of this land, of, how slavery took place, the Ma'afa, all of the people dying, and then the Native Americans, and then, the Mexican War, the Civil War. Like, you go down to Memphis, to the Civil Rights Museum, just in that area, and you just look around like, dang, civil wars were fought here. Like, people's souls are floating around here, it feels like. And it's in the culture of the United States of America for war, civil wars, all of these wars, and I think if we was to educate more on, like for instance, in James, they had the 7 barometers of manhood. You know what I'm saying? Spirituality was one of them. If we can instill spirituality within our community, you'll know, like, to take a child of God is not right.
Mm.
You know,
Right.
if you can put that on your heart, you know, you will know
Absolutely.
that, you know, taking a child of God is just not right. And I know people's pain, they got pain in their heart because their family member got took, their brother, their sister, their cousin, they day ones got took, and it puts pain on the heart. But at the same time, it's all a game that they used against us.
Mm.
Our fears, our deepest fears. You know, if we can instill spirituality to fear nothing but God, you know, we wouldn't have these fears of each other. Because I seen, you know, for example, some people that don't like each other, but then they the best of friends in prison. It's because they just had a fear of each other. They really
Right.
always wanted to know each other. They
Mm.
always wanted to know each other. They always wanted to get to know each other. But they just had that fear. The fear was instead into the community because he's saying, oh, I can't be friends with him because of this. And it's understandable because, you know, people have lost their lives. But
Right.
if we can instill that spirituality within, it could go a long way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate both of you all for joining. And we have some viewers, you know, in and out. But of course, as always, this will live up on the YouTube channel, so everybody can review this and share it out. My final thoughts I want to share too. You know, one of the things that, you know, JC mentioned about the children of God, you know, and one of the things I think is important to instill, and I don't care what organized religion, what title we want to call ourselves, or, you know, we can that's a whole debate in and of itself, religion, right? But to your point about that higher self, right? um when we begin to have our children think beyond their individual experiences, right? When they can see that there's a world outside of them, right? When we begin to teach the, you know, do unto yourself as you wish to be done, right? Love thy neighbor, not your enemy, neighbor, right? When we begin to have our children begin to um, want to create a kind world, want to demonstrate those type of principles and those beliefs, then I think that at the core of changing a community or changing the trajectory of young people's lives will begin to create a life that again will think twice, you know, before we want to do harm to one another. Part of all this is all about relationship, right? So being in relation with one another. And we as a people, Black, brown, and indigenous, have to get back to, it's not something new to us. We just have to get back to our true nature of really which is being a children of God, right? One thing that we will never be able to do is do the treatment that we've received from our oppressor. It's not even in us. You know what I mean? It's not even in us. We can't, we will never put them in slavery for 400 years because we come from the descendant of the creator of the heavens and the earth, which is love, right? We come from that spirit. We just been misdirected. So I think, again, to your points, both of your points about the spirituality piece, and then just really teaching our children and guiding our children into the social emotional and being kind to one another, you know, I'm just going to keep it as simple as that, then I think we can start seeing a change in our communities, you know. And again, it starts with us as the adults, as leaders. So again, this was just part one, y'all. We're going to come back when we can all line up our schedules again. But I truly appreciate both you brothers. And I, just so you all know, and I'm going to say it on record, I admire both of you. JC, even though you my little brother, I admire you so much. You are my older brother in moments. Andre, same to you. And I appreciate you both as being Black men, leaders in this community, and more importantly, just my brothers. So I appreciate you. Thank you all for tapping in. And we're going to see you on the next station. So we got a next show, October 16th. Holy Day of Atonement anniversary. If y'all don't know Holy Day of Atonement, it is the anniversary of the Million Man March, 1995. So October 16th, we always recognize it. We fast, we pray, and we all got some atoning to do. We start with ourselves, but we're going to have a show, next show, and it's going to be with a brother named Kabir Muhammad, who actually created a a credit fixer software so that we can fix our own credit, so that we can be on the journey of buying houses and cars and whatever else we want to do. But he is a young brother who created an entire software system, and he's going to talk about it. So that's the next show, next Saturday at 12 p.m. So tap in, and I appreciate you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right, thanks, Imani. Nice meeting you,
All right,
Jason.
you too. Thank you. Nice to meet you too.
Peace.
Peace.